Just over a week from Election Day, the stakes are high. Arson is suspected of being behind fires in ballot boxes used to collect early votes in Washington State and Oregon. Authorities say there's evidence to suggest the attacks are linked. Our elections analyst Casey Briggs is with me now for more on this. Casey, the FBI is investigating these ballot box fires. Can these votes be recast?
So there's two ballot boxes that have been set alight here, Gemma. One of them, the one in Oregon, only 3 ballots were destroyed. And it sounds like election officials have been able to work out who those ballots belong to, and so they can go back and get in touch with them and they can recast their ballot. The bigger issue is the one in Washington State where hundreds of ballots have been destroyed. Now, election officials have said if they place their ballot, if a person placed their ballot in that box since the time it was last emptied, and they've said the time that that was, they should get back in touch with the elections authorities there, where they will be able to cast a replacement ballot. And we should say that means that they'll get to have their vote valid class. There's no counted. There's no risk of their vote being double counted, because all ballots that go through this process will get checked against the electoral roll, so that can only be cast once. So there's no risk of double voting here. The risk is that someone who has voted will not get that message and will not realise that their vote has been destroyed. The other risk is that this could inspire potentially other incidents into the future, because this is clearly an attack on the democratic process that's been done here. An incendiary device placed next to the box is what the FBI has described what has happened here. This is not a safe state, this is not a swing state, sorry, in the presidential election, but what is really interesting there is this is a very competitive district for Congress. And so there is a risk here that if it is a very close election, that this incident, other incidents like it, if God forbid there happen to be any, could become an issue and become a dispute after the counts, the votes are counted.
Meantime, Casey, Elon Musk, he's now being sued over his cash giveaway.
Yeah, he's being sued by the Philadelphia District Attorney. This is a cash giveaway where Elon Musk has been promising to give away $1 million every day to someone randomly selected who signs a petition run by his super PAC, the America PAC, and is a registered voter. To sign that petition, you have to give up your personal identifying information and make it available to that PAC as well, which is, I guess, the real value in that to the America PAC and to indirectly the Trump campaign. Now, the Philadelphia District Attorney is basically saying that is a lottery, and it's an unregulated lottery, and therefore under Pennsylvania state law it is unlawful. They've said in the suit that yes, these citizens are being lured to give up their personal identifying information and make a political pledge in exchange for the chance to win $1 million. That is a lottery. So a little bit to watch there, but what the other thing that this issue shows us, this giveaway shows us, is an attempt very late in the piece for the Republican Party through an indirect super PAC run by Elon Musk to bolster the Trump campaign's ground game, a ground game that has been perceived as being a little bit weaker than the Democrats' one, because the Trump campaign has really focused more on legal election integrity, law changes, and bolstering its sort of legal team for the aftermath of the election. And the ground game is really important in these elections because voting is voluntary. And Gemma, I want to bring in someone to this conversation who has his ear much closer to the ground in Washington, DC. He's going to be joining us next Wednesday as the results come in to help us understand the vote count. Professor Simon Jackman, who's an expert in US politics and political polling. G'day all the way across the world, Simon. Thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you, Casey.
So, Simon, you are on the ground in the US. You've been there for a couple of weeks now. I might just, first of all, get your take on the vibe on the ground. What's your impression of the state of this race?
Oh, Casey, it's unlike any election I've ever seen my entire adult lifehood studying US elections. I came to the United States and have done a tour of colleagues, former students, working both in academia and on the campaigns. No one is prepared to stick their neck out and make a prediction about how this race is likely to go. Everybody is focusing on how even early voting statistics, 2020, that was COVID, we can't extrapolate anything from that. We turned to the early voting statistics because we gave up on the polls that seemed to be inextricably too tight and well within the margins of error in the states that matter. So we're sitting on tenterhooks. just in the last 24, 36 hours, Casey, I'd say an otherwise inscrutable Harris campaign. Just a few signs starting to come out from some of the analysts there that perhaps they're feeling a little bit confident in the closing week of this campaign, that their internal numbers suggest to them they may have their nose in front in particular the three states that really matter to them: Wisconsin, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. But Casey, other than that small signal, no one, and I've never seen this in a US election, no one is prepared to make a call at this stage.
And of course, you'll find plenty of Trump backers who'll express extreme confidence as well, Simon. Just to the polling quickly, because it does seem like there's been a little bit of a shift toward Donald Trump in national polling. You might have to squint to see it, but in the past week or so, a very small shift maybe in those national headline figures. How significant is that? And does it matter in the grand scheme of things?
It matters in the following way. You're right. I would agree with that characterisation. Probably a percentage point, if that, towards Trump, and Harris probably her lead in national polls once you average them and throw away unreliable polls. Once you average what's left, Harris probably a point in front nationally. Now, why is that significant? I don't think there's any doubt that Harris is going to win the popular vote. Or maybe there's some about that, but that's not the real question. The real question is a Democrat needs a rather larger win in the national popular vote in order for that to translate to being ahead in swing states. Typically what happens is that Democrats run up the score in California and New York. That distorts the national picture. So +1 or +2 nationally, as Hillary Clinton will tell you, was not enough to get over the line in 2016. So that's the one caveat there. Then again, you look at the swing state polling, and there's plenty of that, Casey, and that's where the rubber really hits the road. And again, they've been so stable for the last week. Perhaps there also, Casey, a slight hint of a trend towards Donald Trump. But this is going to turn on who gets their voters out, to what extent those polls are picking up what the final shape of this electorate will look like. And that is the hardest part of polling ahead of a US election. Unlike Australian elections with compulsory turnout, in the US, half of your battle, I'd say actually 3/4 of your battle as a US pollster, is figuring out who is going to show up in either casting an early vote or showing up on election day. It's a huge difficulty for US polling.
And so, Simon, the polls are giving us a big shrug at the moment, other than saying it's close. There's not a whole lot to learn there. As you say, the early voting figures are very hard to divine any trend out of because of the peculiarity, particularly of the last election. So let's just fast forward to 8 days from now. You'll be joining us in the studio to unpick the results as they come in. What are you going to be watching for as an early indication of where things might be heading?
Yeah, so for me, I think Pennsylvania is absolutely such a critical state. Everybody who runs the path to 270 electoral college votes, you end up landing on Pennsylvania as pretty much a must-win state for either side. And then we go down into what parts of Pennsylvania, whose vote comes out first. And so Erie County is a county I'll be sweating on their data. It's a key county away from Philadelphia, way out, as the name suggests, near Lake Erie in the far western part of Pennsylvania. That's a bit of a bellwether, and because it's a smaller county, they might have their vote counted early. That will reveal a lot. And the other thing, Casey, statewide in Pennsylvania, on the eastern seaboard, so it'll be early to get going in the count. How much is Trump ahead on election day voting relative to 2020, because we expect this time, as we saw in 2020, Democrats to be doing better in the early vote, which paradoxically gets counted late, and this will be reminiscent of an election you just called in Queensland, where a similar phenomenon was at work. Understanding the relative magnitudes, we've got a good handle on that, but just unpicking that literally in real time, Casey, in the early going is going to tell us a lot about whether, when the dust settles, and it may not be on the night, has Kamala Harris or Donald Trump won that absolutely key state. of Pennsylvania. A lot turned on that in 2020. I remember that was the state I was sweating on calling that election or looking at the returns from that election. Same will apply this time round, Casey.